Currently in Throne of Liberty, Fury, which is Crossbow Wand, is one of the top damage dealers in Endgame PvE. Not only does it have crazy high sustain damage, but it also has the possibility to have pretty much the best self-healing, which you can put on other players when needed, along with crazy amounts of team support bonuses that you can use. So I've been playing it pretty much non-stop since the raid came out, and it has been going super well. In most content, you can fulfill the role as tank just because of the sheer amount of self-heals you have, and the fact you are the top damage dealer. However, there's a big catch. Tier 3 gear comes on September the 18th, so a lot of this is open to change. I doubt the skills, specializations and masteries and rotation and how to actually play Fury is going to change, but all of this gear that you might be wanting to go for will probably get superseded. At least everything that's not legendary. So Fury is not exactly a class I would recommend switching to right now unless you already have a lot of these things, particularly the weapons. Accompanied with this build is a document like I have done in the past for other classes, and it goes through pretty much every single section and what you need to know, including the boss rotation. And I think what you guys appreciate, the mastery setup and priority. Not everybody has hit level 200 just yet. So I will begin with the skill setups and the rotation. You may have seen some of my DPS tests where you can kill a dummy within 35 seconds, and yeah, that's totally feasible. There is a bit of a catch. You kinda gotta get lucky, so it will take you quite a few tries. This is without any buffs or anything. You can probably get that time down to 20 seconds if you were to use Guardian Stellarite buff food and include a remedy. Additionally, you can cheese the dummy tests by switching Mother Nature's to Frost, using Wind Snatcher and Weak Point Shot for significant damage boosts. So if anybody's doing that, that is kind of cheating because those cannot be applied to bosses. Frost will not affect them, and so Wind Snatcher will not apply. So let's go to what you should actually be using in a scenario like a raid, a trial, any of those boss fights where damage can be particularly important. So what we're focusing on is single target damage, and this is the skill setup we use. I will jump to specializations, and you can see on crossbow we've got detonation mark, that's normally mortal mark with this spec, and it simply accumulates damage and then deals that damage when this thing expires. You can extend its duration because it's a weaken with Selfless Diffusion, which whenever you apply weakens while this is active, you gain a ton of cooldown reduction to all your other abilities on top of extending the duration of your weaken effects, like detonation mark. And the longer you have this thing up, the more accumulated damage you will gain. Whenever you recast detonation mark while you still have a mark active, it will simply explode the previous mark and apply the new one. You can get 2 stacks when you get an offhand, and thus you will deal 80% of all accumulated damage back to the boss. So it's absolutely huge. Selfless Diffusion also increases that chance for the offhand to trigger. And these two are some of the huge abilities here to support the damage that you get from Wand. And it is a reason why as Fury you need to have high amounts of cooldown, attack speed, and buff duration. Without like 50% or more on each, you will struggle to do any meaningful damage here. Mother Nature's Protest you simply use on Flame here. It applies extra weakens along with a tiny bit of extra damage through the burning. Again, we cannot use Frost against CC immune bosses, which is most of them. We have Mana Exchange here just to give us that extra mana regen. You kind of want to have this spec, but it's not overly necessary just so you don't have to cast it as often. And I just like to have the extra stamina. But again, you don't need to have that point here in case you wanted something else. Weak Point Shot you want to cast for that extra critical damage for you and your entire team, but be aware you have to cast it after a Fury or Wrath attack. You can get the perfect block and then cast it and you will apply the debuff. Jumping to the wand skills, Touch of Despair, simply just damage over time, which you will stack up to 3 times and also increase the damage of your basic attacks. Curse Explosion, this is where you will get the most amount of your damage. All of those curses and damage over times that you've applied, whenever you cast Curse Explosion, it will calculate the remaining time on those damage over time effects and how much damage they would deal over the course of that time and deal it instantly. Now, since we don't use Dark Explosion, it will consume all those damage over times. On Fury here, that can work totally fine. You can see we've just cast Curse Explosion and it's going to activate 1 second later, and it immediately gets rid of all of our debuffs that were damage over time as effects. But because we're Fury and we attack so quickly, we immediately get all of them back so fast. By the time we cast the next Curse Explosion, you can see you will have all of those up usually. But it is dependent on having those good stats to be able to do so, including weak enchants, which we'll get into. So then we have Corrupted Magic Circle, this simply to apply another damage over time, which also then lasts for 5 seconds. So you will cast it before you use your Curse Explosion, just like this here. Then you use Curse Explosion and then it removes it, but then because you have the circle, it reapplies it. If you have the Deckman's Wand, you will not use Corrupted Magic Circle, as you will gain its effect through Ray of Disaster. Enchanting Time is simply just a skill damage boost, Valorous Barrier, maximum damage boost, which you can switch over, removing that spec to Blessed Barrier if you need that survivability. Like, it's absolutely crazy. Look at my defense here, 2,200. We cast Blessed Barrier and that goes to 6,400 for the first 2 seconds and then drops down to 4,000. And that is basically going to half the amount of damage you take from anything, allowing you to do high tier trials on still a super squishy build. But you are of course sacrificing damage to do so, as this 92 max damage is quite a lot. Witching Hour, you will always cast just after Curse Explosion, within the 1 second delay before it triggers. That's so you increase the duration of your damage over times, so it increases the potential amount of damage that those damage over times would have dealt over that duration, and thus increase the amount of damage your Curse Explosion will deal. Ray of Disaster is simply just a filler skill with some damage over time, which will also trigger Abyssal Burst a bit more. And it did get nerfed, and they will potentially be reverting that change so it can properly trigger Mother Nature's Protest, as it currently cannot. So that's all the skills and that's the specialization points I recommend using with my current setup. If you are using the Deckman's Wand and the Ackman's Crossbow, not like what I have here, you can potentially use Dark Explosion and Quick Fire. So instead of using Magic Circle here, you will use Quick Fire with the cooldown and the min chain fire. And this simply makes it so that you don't consume your damage over times. You will deal less burst damage, but then since you have quick fire, you have a lot more hits per second. Combined with the effect from Ackman, you will then trigger Abyssal Burst more often. And you can see people doing pretty competitive damage to what I'm doing, at least on dummy tests. Comparing with another player who plays Fury with fairly similar damage to me, they couldn't match my damage output when they used Dark Explosion, but were much closer to it when they did switch to Curse Explosion. But again, it's build dependent and whether or not you're using Belandir Crossbow and Tevent Core on the Legendary Wand. Quickly looking at the passives here, they can change a little bit based on the Masteries, but we have Noble Revival with the Mastery, Warrior's Gambit to basically gain more base damage for all the mana we have, Devotion and Emptiness just to get that Curse cooldown and damage over time boost. You want to have the Light of Devotion and the Eye of Emptiness just so that whenever it's day or night you will still gain that benefit. But if it is nighttime, you can just use Eye of Emptiness and gain the full effect, allowing you to switch a Light of Devotion over to like Battle Spirit instead, thus allowing you to use Selfless Soul, which you will switch off using Eagle Vision to do so. Wraith Speckin, fairly simple, more curse duration, means more damage for your curse explosions. Vampiric Contract, this is where you get all those self heals. Whenever you deal damage to a cursed target, 17.4% of that damage is given back to you as heals. It's not reducing your damage, it's simply giving you all that heal over time. So if an ability does 10,000 damage, you will heal for 1,700. However, you can change this effect to be a damaging effect when you use Vampiric Onslaught, giving up that self-heal. You can do that safely if you have a reliable healer. And so you would normally switch off Malicious Focus in order to do so. I have these explained here in the document, which you can follow, but just to give you an example. Say I run into the nightmare mode and it is nighttime. I will no longer need Light of Devotion. So I can remove this point and I can remove this point. I can't yet because you're restricted. So if I don't want the self heals, I can put that point here. We can also remove this and put that like here. Or we get extra damage resistance here. And now I have this extra damage from Vampiric Onslaught, no longer self heals, and we have Malicious Focus because it is nighttime, we don't need Light of Devotion. But if I don't want to give up the self heals here, I can switch off using this one and take like this point, and now I have Battle Spirit along with Malicious Focus. And that's where you will switch off Eagle to use Selfless Soul. And that's how you can make the most of nighttime while still having the self heals. But again, the most reliable setup, and if you don't want to bother switching, you just use it like that. And so you use Full of Corruption for the extra magical damage boost through Malicious Focus, Eagle Vision just to get the extra crit hit chance and weaken chance. You can see through this mastery here, you get the extra crit, also giving it to your teammates. Bloodlust for the extra critical damage, and Corrupted Nail for the extra weaken chance. We'll get into why that's important later. But then we can look at the masteries. So I have maxed out wand masteries, but there are some choices, and I recommend looking at the document. You can see here what kind of progression I would go through. If you have the wand and if you have the crossbow, depending on what level you have at. Wand are the most important masteries. You want to at least get to 90 to get Abyssal Burst. However, the most important effect here to make Fury work is Corrupting Hit. Without it, I wouldn't play Fury. It just won't do any damage. You need to have the extra curses triggered from the basic attacks. And then Abyssal Burst, based on all of those hits, you get those other explosions. The crossbow masteries are kind of a joke. You're pretty much just using them for a bit of stat padding. There's barely any here that are actually worth going for. Like, we are not using Nature's Gambit, we are not using Mana Breakpoint, but that's also because we don't want to use Mayhem Burst, and we don't want to use Calculated Power. So it simply automatically applies these because we want to get these points near it because they help us with stats we need. You could potentially play with Mayhem Burst, but it's a bit of a nightmare sustaining mana when it activates. And you do not want to be reducing your offhand weapon attack chance because you rely on that to get more hits per second. It is not worth gaining a little bit of extra crossbow damage. Just to be clear, crossbow gives you next to no damage directly. Like, the actual hits of crossbow, you're not doing them to actually deal damage. You're doing them to apply all the wand effects, and those are what deal damage. So it is not important to actually get more crossbow damage whatsoever. But sure, like, there's no better options later on. You may as well get some extra stats here. The top one, Annihilator, is really underwhelming. It is not based on the distance shown here to your target, like it will show 8 meters. It works when we see we have 34% and we move a little bit back. This drops down to 28.8%. That's when we don't have it. But I can show you this example in the normal raid. I'm within 6 meters of the boss and I do not have the buff. Within 5 meters, we gain it. And that is because the distance to our target is based on the center of the boss, not like we need the distance to actually hit the boss. So we'd have to be within like nearly 5 meters to actually gain the benefit from this boss. It's really ridiculous, and it basically makes this mastery not really worth going for unless you're against smaller bosses. But you will have to check your stats whether or not you're actually getting the benefit based on where you are positioned. The bigger the boss, the closer you have to be to the boss, because it is the distance between you and the center of the boss for that particular mastery bonus, for whatever reason. And this then also clashes with Spectra, where you need to have no enemy within 5 meters. So if you have to play like within 5 meters of the boss to actually gain the bonus, then you're just going to be missing the critical damage, and that's not worth giving up versus 20% extra offhand attack chance. These are the masteries I would go with the priority, and don't really worry too much about crossbow masteries. Barely any of them are really important. So now let's jump to rotation. How do you want to use your abilities and in what order? Well, it's nicely displayed here in the document. You simply want to have Mother Nature's protest always active. You will see it glowing red here. Whenever you die, it's going to like reset, so just make sure it's on. And whenever you attack, then you have that chance to apply those burnings. But now for that skill combo. So the order I would use them in when you go to start your boss fight here is first to buff up Enchanting Time, Valorous Barrier, and then Corrupted Magic Circle. This takes advantage of the bit of the cast time, so if you're fighting like Gate of Infinity, you would then have cast this, and after you've gone through that cast time, you will deal damage for the first time, enter combat, and then you can immediately go Selfless Diffusion, Touch of Despair, Detonation Mark, Curse Explosion, or Witching Hour. This is your basic rotation that you want to kind of prioritize. This order in how you use your skills. Ray of Disaster is simply filler for damage, and weak point shot you will have to use when the boss uses a Fury or Wrath attack. Get that perfect block and then cast it. Mana Exchange, use when available for mana. But again, the idea, Enchanting Time, Valorous Barrier, simply just buff abilities. Try to always cast Corrupting Magic Circle when you have Curse Explosion available or just before you're going to cast it, so that the area lasts for 5 seconds and you will apply the damage over time before Curse Explosion, and then it will get applied again after the Curse Explosion. So you will always try to combo together Touch of Despair, Detonation Mark, and then Curse Explosion. After that, Witching Hour. If you find Witching Hours available, don't just immediately cast it. Wait until you've cast your next Curse Explosion and then cast it. And you have to be quick because you want to extend the duration of your current damage over times, your current curses, before the actual explosion goes off 1 second later after you've cast Curse Explosion. And that way you maximize your damage output. And yeah, it's actually pretty simple playing Fury here. There's not a lot to it. In the document, you can see a quick note with overall mastery skills. I would simply just go with these 4. Dragon Ascent is not really worth it, unless you really have no problems with mana. But even then, I doubt it's much more damage than Falling Flower. Consumables, you want to be using these like Stellarite, species damage food like Jelly for undead, Steak for humanoids. You can see these 5 different foods here. You can min-max with scorpion tail, fritters, clam and seafood soup, vegetable stir-fry, and I don't have any right now, but there's mushroom stir-fry as well. Max mana equals more base damage. And yeah, attack remedies, recovery crystals for a bit of a heal. And Guardian, I always just go with Lady Knight and use it whenever I might die. I take a ton of damage and I'm playing a mechanic, I can't heal myself instantly, so it can come in handy there, and otherwise for damage checks for the cooldown boost, if really needed. But of course you can optimize maybe a bit better, supporting your entire team with the Wild Enchanter. But now let's jump to quest log. So the link's just here, and this is where we can talk about gear and stats. I first want to look at the stats and how you want to prioritize them. In the document, they are listed under here. First of all, we look at our attributes. So you just want to focus on dexterity, wisdom. You will put like 20 points in each. Don't go above 20 or you're just wasting with the +2s. And then you'll put the other 14 into perception. That simply gives you the attributes that give you the stats you need most. If you want survivability, you can of course switch some perception over to strength, like I do to get 30 strength for Nightmare. In terms of skill damage boost, this will directly increase the damage of all of your attacks and your curses and damage over times, and it's really important. You get an extra 220 through Enchanting Time, and you will effectively get another 220 whenever you apply Time for Punishment through Corrupting Hint. It won't show on your stat page though. Species damage boost works exactly like skill damage boost, but it's even better because you don't have as much of it. This is simply going to be damage boost against certain enemies. Again, you will get more of this via the food you use, like undead, demon, so on. Just know what enemy you're facing. Max mana. This directly boosts your base damage. And that is again through Noble Revival from Warrior's Gambit. Magic heavy attack chance. The reason we don't really prioritize like ranged magic heavy attack is because, again, all of our damage pretty much just comes through the wand, through those damage over times, and the Curse Explosion. Barely any of it comes from Crossbow, so there's not a lot of point focusing on ranged heavy attack. And it simply improves the chance that you will deal double damage. And yes, your curses can apply to deal double damage. It won't show ×2, it's just this tick will be twice as much damage as normal. And that means your curse explosion will also deal double its damage. It cannot by itself heavy attack again, because that would be double dipping. It would be like your curse does ×2, and now your curse explosion, which is just the damage that the damage over time would deal over its remaining duration, and it makes no sense that that would be doubled again. So it isn't. It's simply just a modifier based on the damage over time effect. Like this is 250. If that was going to be 10 seconds more, that's going to be 2,500 damage that my curse explosion would deal. And if that was a heavy attack 250, then this could be like 500. And thus, after 10 seconds, that would be 5,000 damage, and that's how much the curse explosion would deal. Critical hit chance. Again, you can just focus on the magic one. And that just allows all those damage over times to get boosted by your critical damage, which is that here, which you're getting through like your armor set, the spectral, bloodlust, artifact 9%, and weak point shot is going to boost it by another 24% when that applies. Cooldown speed, attack speed, buff duration, all of these are kind of linked and very important to get a lot of them. Cooldown speed, you simply need to cast your abilities a bit more often, and it's really important to have for Selfless Diffusion so you can cast it more often to give you even more cooldown reduction. Attack speed, which is important to cast more basic attacks so you can apply these curses again really quickly. And buff duration, really important just to extend the duration that Selfless Diffusion is active. It also helps with enchanting time and Valorous Barrier. Mana cost efficiency, simply to help you maintain casting all of those abilities. And here on this setup, I have no problem whatsoever with my mana. Just try and always cast Mana Exchange when that's available. Finally, Weaken Chance. Do not underestimate its importance. What it does, I don't know the exact formula, but it increases the chance you will apply your curses, whether that's through the Tevent's effect. This normally has 15%, but with Weaken Chance that can get way higher. I have like 965 here, and it's nearly a 90% chance that I would apply Tevent whenever I apply a curse. I near instantly get it. Here are some rough tests that I did for it. And then Corrupting Hit, it's a chance to apply, so having higher Weaken Chance means a higher chance you will trigger this. And that way again, you can get those curses applied near immediately so that when you cast that Curse Explosion, it will deal as much damage as possible because you have all those curses again. By looking at your choices, legendary weapons, there's no question you want to go with the wand, and you ideally want to have the Tevent wand effect. You can get away with using Deckmans. It's not as ideal, as you can already get Corrupted Magic Circuit effect by manually casting it. And then you miss out on the damage over time and the extra weaken that is the Tevent bonus. You can maybe make the legendary crossbow work, but only if you realistically have the Tevent wand, which has the high base damage. In terms of the actual stats you want to go with this thing, you can take out cooldown and dexterity like I did, but you can just as well take perception or attack speed. I've looked at all of them and they near enough match how much effect they would give you. Just be careful of more attack speed. The higher server delay you have here, the less effective attack speed is going to do. Like I can have super high attack speed, but because my server delay is super high, I would barely do any hits per second. So I would be cautious pushing that much higher than like 80, 90, 100% unless you have really good connection. In terms of crossbow weapons, Balandir is usually the best for this setup of playing, but you can get away with using Akman. This gives you all those extra hits per second through your quickfire when you use Selfless Diffusion. When you do so, you need to change up your build. You don't use the normal Curse Explosion, you use Dark Explosion so you don't consume those damage over time effects, and then you get all those extra hits per second through Quickfire, which you're going to spam all the time, which means more Abyssal Bursts. I found it's not as high damage, not as high burst damage as the setup I use, but I guess it can be a bit cheaper. And realistically guys, there just isn't alternatives. It's either Tevent or Deckman's Wand, and then Balandir or Akman Crossbow. If you don't already have those, I wouldn't buy them right now because tier 3 is coming and we don't know what weapons we'll be getting, what new skill effects we'll be getting with them. So I would just wait. As for legendary armor and the sets, I would go with the legendary gloves and I would get the perception, fortitude and heavy attack on them. However, I would recommend waiting. I am not going to upgrade them and I'm going to wait for tier 3 to see what kind of armor sets we get. Because imagine I got the legendary gloves, I upgraded them, and then tier 3 drops and the only real accessible pieces to create a set would be like gloves and boots. And now I'd be shooting myself in the foot since I have legendary gloves. I maybe need to buy some super expensive legs to complete that new set that could be super good for me. But as for tier 2, if you currently have the ones available, I wouldn't go and buy these. You want 2 spectral and you want 2 sacred. You can mix and match. You can have like the spectral boots and pants and then the sacred armor piece and helmet. It doesn't really matter. Just get 2 spectral and 2 sacred. I don't recommend the spectral or the sacred arms because they don't have attack speed. In terms of accessories, again, you could use the legendary ring and this would be the best bet. I would get wisdom, perception and cooldown on it. But again, we don't know what tier 3 rings we'd be getting. There could be 2 super good tier 3 rings and I may want those ones instead of getting a tier 3 bracelet or necklace. It could be some really garbage one and then I'd be better having a legendary one of that. So I will just wait. As for traits, you can see what priorities are here. For weapons, you're going like attack speed, buff duration, cooldown speed if available, and then getting things like mana, cost efficiency, heavy attack, critical hit. For armor, similarly, you get like attack speed, max mana, movement speed, skill damage resistance, max health, max stamina. And then lastly, you can take like evasion. It doesn't really matter. Both evasion and endurance don't really help in PvE in terms of surviving those boss fights. Like the important damage to survive is going to be one-shots, and evasion won't help you and endurance won't help you. They are just a chance. You can never get that to 100%, so there's always the chance you don't evade the attack and then boom, you're dead. You don't want that to happen, so these are kind of pointless. And if you aren't dying to an attack, you can usually easily overheal it. And accessories, skill damage boost, buff duration, max mana. And just keep in mind you can get weaken chance, extra weaken chance. Sometimes on the ring traits, like on the legendary ring, you can take it here instead of max mana, and sometimes even on the necklace traits. Just depends which ones you have, these don't have it. As for resonance traits, you just get the cooldown on weapons, and necklace and rings you can get the weaken chance. Legendary ones don't have resonance, and we will be getting tier 3 resonance. We don't know if there'll be new different effects or simply just upgraded. And yeah, everything else is just like max mana. In terms of runes, the rune synergies, you want to have that attack speed and dex on the weapons here. With the actual runes, getting skill damage boost with attack, weaken chance with support, and then a chaos rune for skill damage boost. If you don't have a chaos rune, go with max mana. If you don't have skill damage boost, maybe you have a heavy attack one instead. Necklace, you can get the synergy here for max health, and then also wisdom. You can potentially switch that to dex if you can already hit 99. The runes themselves, just boss magic heavy attack on the attack rune and the chaos rune with then max mana. For the bracelet and the belt, you can technically do away with both synergies and just go all boss magic heavy attack. But I like sometimes to go on the bracelet to also get that attack speed, and so you get that synergy and you get extra max health. Rings, you can get that extra weaken chance, chaos rune and then attack rune for more boss magic heavy attack, and you get the cooldown and perception. You can potentially switch that over to strength if you need more hit points instead of perception. Earrings, you're just going with the crit and the fortitude. You can switch that again to get more hit points instead of crit, and the runes themselves just boss magic heavy attack and max mana. As for the artifacts, you simply want to get the 4 Chaos Harbinger for the 9% crit damage, and then you can use a Solar Stone for the extra base damage here every 2 minutes, and a lunar stone for the extra 4% whenever you use a control skill, base damage. And be aware, detonation mark is a control skill, which is a damage attack, which will apply to give you that extra base damage boost. And be aware, in like short boss fights, field bosses, you can go below 40% health just by taking fall damage, and then use this one here, which is the Ancestral Lunar Stone. If you want to go full survivability, you need some extra hit points, you can go the full Ancestral Armor setup here, getting more max health and percentage max health. And you also get the Solar Stone, which can give you more max health when needed. But yeah, that's about it for the build. The rest we have gone through in terms of skills and everything here. If you need to farm Mastery on Fury here, I wouldn't recommend it. Like if you have Da Vinci, you can simply farm Mastery on a different weapon combo, but you could use the multi-target farming setup that I have suggested here. I personally don't use it because at the moment I'm now just farming levels for Spear and Crossbow. My wand's already 200, so that would just be a waste to farm on wand. But you could have something like this setup here with these skills, these specializations, and the general idea is apply curses to your targets, then explode them. You got your trap for a bit of a stun. You got Mother Nature's to apply the debuff to then apply Wind Snatcher for attack speed. Mortal Mark for a tanky enemy. And yeah, you can probably optimize it further, but this should suitably give you enough multi-target damage to contribute enough to farming those Abyss dungeons. And just join a group here through the party finder. It's much more easier than trying to solo it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Again, you can watch this gameplay here if you want to see what it's like to play in real time. This is the hard mode of the raid, and we beat it super fast here. I will add the gameplay of a casual tier 11 Chapel of Madness too. Just be aware these trials will totally be getting reworked, and they'll probably be a complete different experience. But again, some gameplay can help as how to kind of play Fury in a real combat environment setting. You can see a dummy test here. You can use these calculators if you want, with the quest log link, with also everything here. Just be aware again, tier 3 is on September the 18th, so I don't know how much of this build will change with that. Maybe it will take a long time to actually get tier 3 gear, and this build may remain relevant for a long time. Maybe there'll only be some new armor pieces that will be good. Queen Belandir could still remain better than any of the introductory tier 3 weapons until they potentially in a few months release tier 3 archboss weapons. We don't know when that will happen, and again, we don't really have any more details about tier 3. I may very well fully switch over to something plus Orb instead of Fury if that deals more damage. I will try to keep you guys updated, but follow along with my update videos and I'll give you the info. But yeah, hopefully this helps. Thanks all for watching. Another special thank you to all my channel members for your added support, and I'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.